Hello, everyone. Hello. It's so good to be back. Monsieur Gatto is so excited. We're here. He has been after me to get the show on the road and stop being late. So thank you all for your patience as I am running a few minutes behind. But we're here. Good evening, Bess. It's so good to see you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It feels like it has been donkey's years since we've been together. So I'm just thrilled to be returning. I do feel a little bit scattered because I always feel that way when I'm coming back after a bit of a break, but also delighted to be back with all of you. So thank you for joining me. So tonight, I've got some updates. I have to start on a new phase of the project. I am excited. I thought I'd start with some updates on how some aspects of the project are going, because for those of you in the know who are hanging out at Discord, who follow us elsewhere, and who happen to be Patreon subscribers, you know we are working on a really big costume build for debut, we hope, fingers crossed, at Wild Wild West Con. That's the plan. Whether or not I'm able to finish the project by my deadline or not is another story. So typically, I do try and have everything basically done a week before any convention. I try not to be doing any big sewing anymore that last week, because final week we have a bunch of like packing and loading in and all sorts of logistical things that I really need to be focusing on. And it's one of those things that I think was a really big part of my learning experience as a time traveler and the principal costumer, if you will, for the Grand Arbiter and myself, was that scheduling appropriately is everything. That doesn't mean I don't still have some crunches. It doesn't mean I don't still pull some crazy late night sewing sessions and that sort of thing. But I actively try and minimize and to do a better job at my scheduling with the projects, which means staying on top of things, continuing to work, and all of that jazz, if you will. So let me give you a bit of an update. I'm working on my chapeau in part because it was something I could work on while other pieces were sort of in sort of piecemeal state, if you will, because we're having some machine embroidery done for the frocks. And so that means pieces of the frocks are being embroidered and I can't put them together and assemble them until the embroidery is done. So I've been working on things kind of bouncing around between different aspects of the project. That's not my normal approach to things, but it is a fun challenge. So in the meantime, whilst I've been working on all of that, I've also been working on my chapeau. And this has also been a bit of a different experience. If you've seen any of my recent social media posts, you know that I did like the wildest thing. I put a hole in my hat on purpose. I'm very pleased with how the hole turned out, but it felt really surreal putting a hole in my hat, because normally you want your hat frame to be intact. You want it to be strong and firm and all of those things, and putting a hole in it really can sort of damage the integrity of the frame. And so I had to think about this very carefully and my approach. And also covering it whilst doing all of this was rather tricky. So, and as I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, I could have done this, that, and the other better. I'm not going to fixate on my own perfectionism, but you have to understand that I do also struggle with perfectionism, and that I can always see those sniggly little errors, even when I know it's it really isn't worth fixating on them because the overall project is good. But that's my personal struggle. Ooh, let's see. Bess says, I have made the dubious decision to make 2 caftans in the next 3 weeks, one in cotton crepe as a wearable mock-up. What a great idea. The other is in silk charmeuse to wear to frocktails. Oh my gosh. All right. Yes. For which she just bought tickets and the theme is gilded. You are going to look so smashing. I'm very excited for you to go. And I think that a silk charmeuse caftan is going to look absolutely stunning. I am so curious to know what your pattern is that you're working with. And I'd love to see pictures of your project in progress. And also, thank you. My hat hole. There will be something in the hole. It's not going to remain a hole, and the hat will be lined. So right now you've got like this picture window into the interior of the hat frame, so you can see the wire and the buckram and all of the things I do to create the frame. What I realized whilst I was putting this together was that I had to do all of this and make certain this little hole was done before I attached it to the brim. And this is not my normal approach to things, but I needed this to be separate as long as possible because I knew installing the hole in the side of my hat would be so much easier to do whilst the hat crown was not attached to the brim. I think that possibly the most easy way to have done this would have been to make the decision much earlier that I was going to make a little cavern inside my hat for a cheeky little figure to peek out of, so that I could have done some of this work whilst the side of the crown was entirely flat. But, you know, it was a thought that came to me in a conversation with the Grand Arbiter. He was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if you had like a little creature living inside your hat, like it's a house. And I was like, oh, that's a wonderful idea. What a brilliant idea. We could put a little mascot in here. And then I had to figure out how to engineer it. But I'd already started building the hat at that point. So this is going to be a mascot house, and it will sit on my head sort of like this. So the mascot peeks out here. So you can see it really well from the side of my head. You can see it a bit when I'm facing forward because I always wear my hats cocked to the side like so. I will say all of these greens look really good with my hair, which I feel very excited for. So yes, the creature is actually, I guess it goes more like this. It's even a little bit more, you can see it's sort of in that front quarter of the crown, wrapping a little bit forward. And so the little creature will peek out here and have its home. So I'm excited for it. And the brim is all done, but needs to be attached to the hat. I still have this portion intact, and I'll be cutting that out. So this will be a hole eventually, but this preserves the fabric and the tension of the fabric whilst I was working on the hat. So Beth says she's using the Charm Patterns Elizabeth caftan. Ooh. The silk she shared in Discord way back. Oh gosh, yes, it's that hand-painted green. Oh my gosh. And gold with florals. I remember this. It was absolutely stunning fabric. This is going to be the most glorious caftan, Bess, and I'm very excited to see it come to life. Good luck. And also congratulations on finding the right pattern, that's such a big step forward. The charm patterns are so good. Gertie does such a wonderful job with her drafting, her sizing, everything, that I know this is going to be an absolutely stunning garment. And I look forward to seeing it on you. So fingers crossed it all goes off. I normally find that whilst there are some fussy bits, depending on the kaftan and the finish, that they're very forgiving garments. Normally, I have to do a little bit of adjustment, shall we say, in the neckline area to make certain that I don't have too much gapping if I'm doing like a crossover thing or anything like that. So it has the right position for me and also isn't like too gappy. But for the most part, I find kaftans to be so lovely in their forgiveness in terms of sizing and adjustment. I'm very short person, so I always have to shorten my kaftans, or I risk looking so fabulous in my long drapey kaftan that I trip and stumble over my fabulosity, which is something I really try and avoid. So hopefully you will also find that this is a very easy to adjust pattern and that it goes together very quickly. But I think charm patterns were a good place to start. I also like the TLC kaftan from Decades of Style. That's one I've made up so many times. I highly recommend it for anyone looking for a kaftan pattern. It's very fun to work with. It has great pockets and is very accommodating for a variety of styles and figures. Oh, this is lovely. So Beth says the markup will be the short length to probably be used as a swim cover up, and the silk will be long. Absolutely perfect, just as it should be, in my opinion. Silk Charmeuse deserves all of the drapiness and all of the length and all of the opportunity to be very dramatic. So you've seen the hat. The hat is coming together. I'm very excited. The next steps are really, so I'm intending to put these little, they're actually Chicago screws. They look like rivets, but they're Chicago screws, which means they have a little bit of motion to them. That's something I want, because I'm going to put a screen inside here that I want to be able to open and close, to close it when I don't have the creature sticking out, and like pull it open when I want the creature to be peeking out. At least that's the plan. So I'm using the Chicago screws as hinges. So I'm going to be putting a Chicago screw in each point of my little facing that I wrapped around my hole that I worked in to the chapeau. And then I'm going to be putting some little rhinestones in between to look like small, very fabulous rivets. So I wanted it to have a little bit of that industrial steampunk flair, which I don't work into very many of my ensembles, but sometimes I want a little bit of that vibe. A lot of whimsy, because that really is, that's actually my aesthetic, is to have a bit of whimsy, to a lot of whimsy in my garments. Hello, Cheshire. How good to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining. So you can see a little bit of how this construction happened on the inside. There's a lot of like fussy hand stitching that happened. You can see how I slashed the facing to wrap to the inside, and then that got sort of hand stitched in place. I used a fusible face sort of adhesive on this facing so I could fuse the silk to the interfacing, which helps prevent some fraying, and then fuse it a little bit lightly to the hat. There's a very small amount of hand sewing here around the edge to reinforce that. And then it's going to get these Chicago screws. That was actually perhaps one of the most stressful things I've ever done to a hat, because I knew that at this point, I've put a good probably 50 hours of work into the hat. And yeah, at least 50 hours. And so we're pretty far along into the hat. And I knew that if I buggered up the grommet or the Chicago screw, if I did a bad job with my hole, I would have essentially wasted all 50 hours of labor, and I would not necessarily be able to fix it. This was very stressful putting that first one in, but the first one went pretty well, so I feel all right about doing the next three. I'm only putting in 3 more, so it's very exciting. Yes, Cheshire, it's a lot of hours. Hat making is incredibly time consuming. It's pretty intensive. I think that some people might be faster, that there might be some tricks that I don't know. I do think I tend to be very methodical, and whilst I use some modern adaptations to save me time, there's still a lot of handwork that goes into covering the hat, and you know, building the frame takes a fair amount of handwork as well, although much improved by, you can see some of the machine stitching in there. That's very helpful to do. So I combine handwork and machine work for my hat making, which does speed things up. Covering the hat was pretty intensive this time. For whatever reason, I really struggled to get the side of my hat to go into position and stretch around as normal. It was unusual to have problem for me. And I said, I can see the little things that I would do differently, but they're minor, so I'm not going to point them out. A huge part of that 50 hours was covering the frame as well. So I guess I wouldn't be totally out all 50 hours because I'd still have the brim, but I'd have to start from scratch with this, and that would be pretty gutting. So I'm grateful this is all right put together, and I just have 3 more. Thank you, Bess. Thank you. I really, I think overall it looks extremely smooth. I want to, like, I pointed out that I can see the little sniggly errors because I think it's important, or maybe error is the wrong word, but I can see the little sniggly things I would do differently. The ways in which the fabric didn't always cooperate because I'm right here. And I think it's important, or I want to be transparent, that I struggle with perfectionism too, because I encourage everyone to let that go. And it's not fair of me to talk about letting go your own perfectionism if I don't share that I struggle sometimes too, if that makes sense. But let's talk about the good things, because really there's enough like hardness in the world, right? This is, I think, overall one of the smoothest hat frames I've ever created. So I'm very pleased. I took what I learned from the dragon hat, and I increased the amount of mulling I used. So, and I pieced my mulling. So mulling is the layer of flannelette or cotton, flannel, or very thin wool batting or what have you that you layer on to the frame to cover up the texture of the buckram, as well as to smooth out the places where you're joining the frame. And the way I learned to do hat making very originally, the person who sort of got me started on the raw basics a long time ago, was also a self-taught hat maker and never ever mentioned mulling. So I didn't learn about mulling my hats probably until 12 or 15 years ago. And that was pretty transformational on its own. Really smoothed things out. It gave me a nicer finish. And then as I was sort of mucking about with the dragon hat, it occurred to me that no one ever said I could only do one layer of mulling, that I could fill in the places where there are like little humps and things with slightly smaller pieces of mulling to smooth out the layers, sort of like a reverse topography map, if you're into that sort of thing. And so I build up my mulling 2 to 3 layers in some places to balance out any of the bias tape, any of the joins. So I ended up with a very smooth surface before I added my fabric to the frame, which means that you can't really see any lumps. You can see down here my very fine hand stitching created a tiny little lip that's going to get covered by my hat band, and it is also where I join the brim to the crown. So I think that some texture, some bumps are a little bit inevitable, but you know they're going to be covered by things, so that's all right. Oh yes, Beth says, as a maker, I definitely know all the things I did wrong or not perfectly, but then my husband looks at whatever it is and sees absolutely none of it. And I think that's so important to keep in mind. And so Cheshire says, add fill up your mulling to the question list. Yes. Let's see. All right. Yeah, good. I have a little scrap of this. So we're going to come back to the mulling. Oh my gosh. Bess continues, although he also looked at 2 pieces of uneven plaid laid out in different directions and could not at all tell the difference, even though it was obvious to me. Bess was trying to decide which she liked. Yeah, you know, the grand arbiter can sometimes see that something is a little hinky about fabric layout. But if I don't point it out specifically to him, he often can't tell where I haven't matched things up. He just doesn't look for it. That comes a bit with a trained sewer's eye. So I quip to him pretty often that there are certain things I do because I know that other sewers will see it and notice it. And so that's a gift to my fellow sewers, as it were. All right, so let's talk about mulling a little bit. So Cheshire, this is not like mulled wine. This is some cotton flannel. It's very thin. This is what I use this time around. I've used all kinds of cotton flannel, but this is just what I had kicking about. And so what I do is I cut pieces of this to match the buckram pieces that I create the lampshades out of that's going to become my hat. And so you can see on the inside, here's the buckram. It has a really nubby, rough texture. And so what I do with the mulling is on the outside, I don't normally do this on the inside of the hat. I run this over the buckram, and I actually use adhesive now. I glue it in place because I know it's going to get stitched over later. And so it's glued in place to create a very smooth surface to the hat. And any place that there's like another bumpy bit that causes more texture, I cut another piece that's a little bit smaller and I place it in there to like even up the surface so everything is flush when I get done. Like a little bit like woodworking, because you're sort of filling in the gaps. Mulling is padding. That's it. That's the words. That's exactly it, Cheshire. Also, hello, Scott. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining tonight. What a treat. Exactly like this. So Cheshire says it's like padding, like leather dust for gauges. Yes, exactly so. Oh my gosh, Scott asks, where do I get my inspiration for my creative outfits? Oh, lots of places. Some of it is that the Grand Arbiter and I will sort of bounce around ideas for a bit on a theme that we might want to do or a color story that we want. So this one was a combination. We wanted to do something green. We haven't done a green ensemble in a long time, and we both love green, and so we wanted to do something green. So first was the color story. We knew the color sort of family we wanted to do. And then it was a question of what kind of vibe we were going to go with for this garment. We didn't know any themes for the next year's cons. And so we weren't going to be making anything towards any specific convention at the time we started planning this. So we had both, however, fallen in love with a game called Strange Horticulture, which is kind of like this very charming mystery puzzle solving game that has some dark academia vibes. By some, I mean scads. It's very much in that wheelhouse. And we were like, ooh, wouldn't it be fun to do like a little dark academia inspired ensemble that's green? And then we were like, all right, but what are we going to do with this thing? And so then I start sketching and I come up with some thoughts on the page, as it were. I sketch out some ideas that are appealing to me, and then I talk over them with the Grand Arbiter and see if he has any strong objections to what I'm doing. He does get to say, I don't want to wear something, right? He does get some veto power, but I'm the overall driver of the final design. So I provide the design. He gives me feedback on things he likes and doesn't like, or things he'd like to see, or some ideas that have been noodling around in his brain. And so we pass back and forth in conversation, and then we start refining the garments. Now, sometimes I go to fashion plates from the 19th century and look for details that I find interesting. In this case, for the Dark Academia ensemble, I went to a few fashion fates to look for maybe some trim elements that I thought would be fun. And then I did a lot of watching of like Dark Academia inspired media. So like Wednesday and The School for Good and Evil and magicians and things like that. And I went through some lists looking for recommendations for things that are considered dark academia. A lot of them are books I've read and enjoyed in some cases already, but I'm looking for visual stimulus, right? So whilst I love the books, they don't always give me ideas for the design. So I kept looking for movies, streaming shows, that sort of thing. And what's really interesting to me is the number of things that are just like shows and movies set at university in Europe or the United Kingdom. And people were like, that's dark academia. And I'm like, it's really just a bog standard show set at a university. There's nothing magical or dark or gothic or anything like that about this particular thing. So like finding some films and things that fit the bill was a bit tricky, but I felt like I got enough of a sense, and then I just sort of went my own way. So funnily enough, I think when this garment is done, even though it wasn't particularly inspired by Wicked, that people will see a sort of similarity or kinship. And I'm delighted by that, because the costume designer for Wicked is absolutely brilliant and did gorgeous work. Whilst I wasn't necessarily pulling from that for an homage to the show, it is a green ensemble in the year after Wicked for Good came out, and the first film, the first Wicked, or first half of Wicked, takes place at the university, and so that the magic school, so that has you know, some really dark academia vibes. I love this. Cheshire says dark academia requires one morally grey teacher and 57 places to hide dead people. That seems right. Honestly, I can't argue with your interpretation. That seems right. So I did make a hat where we could hide things anyway. Not maybe entire dead people, but small creatures up to possibly no good. Who knows? It's very fun. Hopefully it comes out. Also, we commissioned some very special embroidery patterns for this project. And so we are getting some things machine embroidered, and you can see some of that is coming together. I'm very excited by how that's coming together. So there's some ombre situation and all sorts of beautiful elements that are happening, and it's sort of like a little bit tonal. I wanted it to all be very subtle, so you can kind of see the embroidery depending on the light, and then sometimes it disappears, which I think adds to a little bit of a mysterious allure to the garment. So Scott says, that sounds like experience with the dead body locations in rejoinder to Cheshire. Well, you know, we are time travelers. We must be prepared for all sorts of things. So this is what I've been largely working on is the chapeau, but also preparing pieces to be embroidered and getting all of the moving parts together, as well as rebuilding some underpinnings, building some fresh underpinnings, and all of these necessary elements that help bring together the garment. Normally, the hat is one of the last things I make, so it's been kind of interesting starting with the hat. I do love to have a matching or coordinating chapeau to go with my frocks, because I feel like it really finishes the ensemble, especially when doing anything from before 1965. Usually hats were part of any sort of day wear experience or formal ensembles, and so I like to include a hat. It gives it a sort of finishing touch, and it also makes me more viable for time traveling. So I like to make a hat, but oh, the things a mime learns that lots cool with the disappearing, reappearing, that looks cool with the disappearing, reappearing design. Yeah, thank you. Yes. All right. So one of the things I need to do is start prepping the Grand Arbiter's West kit. And so, my darlings, it's time to go back to the drawing board a little bit and look at the pattern I made for the dragon, so you can see a little bit of how I figured out the placement of the stripes on the front of the dragon West kit for the Grand Arbiter. And so I'm going to be taking that and reimagining it for our our new garment. And I'm just pulling out pattern pieces. Fortunately, I did recall to date my pattern pieces. So very important, because I keep track of what the most current sizing is that way. All right. Let's put that to the side. We don't need this. Pardon me while I absolutely kind of faff about. Yes. Right. Da da da. We've got all the Star Trek uniform pieces in here too. That was a really fun, wonderful project that I love how it turned out. And also it had a million pieces because I created all of these yoke elements. Is this, what is this? All right. Okay, good. Sometimes I write my own notes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yes, Beth says, you should also label your mock-ups to match the pattern version they are made from. Ask me how I know. Oh my gosh. Is solidarity. Also, I know you went through the fire on a certain project. So, yes. Fortunately, I usually do a version number on the Grand Arbiter's patterns. On mine, as well. So I'll say like version 1, 2, 3, what have you. Because and I try and label all of the pieces, because when you're doing a bunch of alterations and mucking about, Bess, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I hard empathize. I was very derailed by the shawl collar incident, if you will, and turning that one waistcoat. And I haven't gone back to it, and I really need to for lots of reasons. So, however, should you ever wish for private consultation on fits, we can always make a date and an appointment to look at things and take stock of your fit and try and get back on track so that you can tackle this mountain of the West Kit. Beth says, my patterns are all labeled nicely, but the mock-ups are a mess. Yes, I have been there. I do try and put the same information on my mock-ups as I do on my patterns, and I just write all over them. But sometimes in the sort of frenzy of creating these things, it's very easy to forget some labeling. And I know with the Starfleet uniforms, I was building the Grand Arbiters and doing a commission at the same time. And they were both for a corseted waistcoat as a uniform, a Starfleet uniform, for people who are very similar in size. And so it was really easy to get these pieces mixed up. And I definitely did that towards the end. And so when I was putting away my pattern pieces and the mock-ups, I definitely had this moment where I was like, but whose yoke is this? Because the yoke pieces were very, very similar and things like that. And so I absolutely forget sometimes. But I try and be really diligent because it makes my life easier later. And yes, definitely message me in February and we'll see what we can set up. I would be happy to spend a couple of hours doing a little virtual fitting. So, and for those who are wondering, Bess took the class with me. And so usually when someone has been my student for a class and what have you, I really do try and make myself available to help out as they need in order to finish the garment. So this is very normal behavior. All right, so I've got my pattern pieces, I think. When is it? Oh yeah, that's from 2019. A different world, entirely different era. None of us come from that time anymore. Oh, thank you, Bess. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I just want you to have the garment that fits you, that you are happy with, to get you as close as I can. And I know the West Kit was a real like introduction to how tricksy that can be in some cases. We discovered so many things together as a class, and the ways in which like you can tackle things and you fix one problem only to reveal something else that is not going properly across the body. And it's always a patterning issue, and it's always this thing of like tracking down how the pattern needs adjustment, but sometimes those adjustments are very finicky. And so it turns out that waistcoats, I think, are more challenging to fit than corsets. I didn't think I was going to feel that way, but I do after that course. So I'm sure there are many tailors out in the universe who are like, yes, we could have told you that, you absolute cheeky menace. So, all right, we've got that and that. Very good. Da, da. Corset side back. I have to remind myself of errors. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Right. Oh, okay. Fortunately, the Grand Arbiter has been very size consistent now for a while, which is very helpful. And he usually is, but you know, as you change times in life, your body will change with you. So, no, it's very rare for someone to stay the same sort of physical presentation as a 17-year-old at, let's say, 37 or 3,573. Like at that point, some changes have occurred. That's very normal. So it's important to like not feel bad about the shift. But it's lovely when the shift is not dramatic, or you know, not every 2 to 3 months. That's pretty difficult to keep up with. Yes. Yeah, no, I love this. Beth says the neck and shoulders are absolutely a bear. Corsets really do seem easy after tailoring. You know, maybe this is what I need to start telling people. Corsetry is easy compared to tailoring. So one thing of note is I will not do a fully tailored three-piece suit. I don't feel I have the skill for it. I have enough tailoring skill to put together a beautiful waistcoat, but I'm certainly not, you know, I haven't gone to Italy and trained with a master or anything like that. I know enough to know how much more there is to learn. And I really admire professional tailors who are able to do like the entirety of a suit, from the coat to the waistcoat to the trousers, and even an overcoat, which is such a gorgeous piece of tailoring, or it can be. I really admire a beautifully done overcoat. I'm a little bit obsessed with really fine tailoring, but I'm definitely a dressmaker and a corsetier and a hat maker, and I have some tailoring skills, which I'm very happy to share. So, you know, basic tailoring. Mm. All right, so I've got my old pattern, my new old pattern, and I have been very happy with this overall. I'm just making certain that everything matches up. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Come here. Okay. Do you think that's going to have a little adjustment there? Probably. This should be good to go. But the main thing is I needed the front of my waistcoat to get going with. So let me share a little bit about this, because we're going to do some really beautiful adjustments here. Or rather, I'm going to set it up to do some piecing and some style adjustments rather than sizing adjustments on the front of the waistcoat. We've gotten it to a place where the Grand Arbiter is very comfortable with his waistcoat, where it's not riding up in weird places, where it feels good in the arm side, and all of these things. Very important. I joke about tormenting him with these because they're corseted, and so they have a rigid substructure, they have bones, they lace closed, all of that. But I'm actually not intending to torment the Grand Arbiter. I want him to feel good and comfortable in his clothes. So but I also want him to have the drama he dreams of, and he dreams of a lot of drama in his garments. So what I want to do today is prepare the stripes for the chevrons so I can start piecing the fabric for the front of his waistcoat and get that all embroidered as well. And I also need to get sort of constructing the engineering of his lapels and collar, because I want him to have just beautiful lapels, a gorgeous collar. He loves having something beautiful like that. So we're going to be working on all of that. And I will probably revisit my sketch a bit. So first things first, I need to trace this out so I can add in new style lines, because it's covered with all sorts of notation and lines and seam lines and all sorts of things. So, and one of the things I promised the Grand Arbiter is this would look different than the dragon. So with the dragon, we did a sort of ombre color shift, which I really love so much that I'm doing another ombre for this particular garment. And that means more stripes. And I love stripes, really love stripes. So I decided that I wanted to have this sort of chevron on the front of my skirt, and I wanted to mirror the chevrons on the front of the Grand Arbiter's waistcoat. And I'd already done a sort of chevron for his waistcoat on the dragon costume, but it was very shallow. There were not particularly dramatic stripes. And so I really want to make these very dramatic for this one to distinguish it from the dragon. And also to go with the kind of like more angular feel that we are embracing for this particular garment set. So Scott asked earlier, like, where do I get my ideas? How do I get my ideas? And part of it is that I'm really impelled by my own kind of aesthetic sense to go certain places. And sometimes I just am obsessed with a kind of technique or element, and I'm going to keep using it until I am no longer obsessed. So in this case, I'm really obsessed with ombre, and I keep coming back to it. So I'm also obsessed with stripes. I've been obsessed with stripes maybe forever. I just love a stripe. So what I've done here, I'm going to take you in a little bit. You can see a bit here. I've got my pattern on my table underneath my tracing paper. This is Swedish tracing paper, which I use a lot for making my own patterns or for tracing out patterns. I'm using some handy dandy little pattern weights. I love these. They're so effective, and they allow me to do things quickly, which I really appreciate. The square ones were made by my dear friend, Deborah Hensley, and they're so charming. And I actually really love the shape of them because they kind of hold down more of the pattern at the time. So I'm just going to trace my basic shape here. I'm tracing it exactly without the style lines from the dragon. So when I was going in and working on the skirt, I had to redo my style lines a couple of times to get the ombre just so. So I'm expecting to have to muck about a bit with this until I'm really happy with how my chevrons are looking. So I'll be sketching them in initially using either a Frixion pen or number 2 pencil so I can erase my work. But the main shape of the waistcoat I'm tracing out with a Sharpie. I do this when I'm teaching because I want people to be able to see what I'm doing on camera. So normally when I'm not demoing, I use like a number 2 pencil or something like that because I want to be able to erase my work. But you can't see it on the screen if I use a number 2 pencil. All right, let's roll this out of the way a bit more. I like the Swedish tracing paper a lot. Currently, it's cheaper than the paper I used to use for patterning. It used to be quite expensive by comparison. So the first time I used it, it felt very decadent, but it's gotten so yeah. Oh, hello, Alicia. Hi, my friend. So Alicia says, hello, hello, or what's the tea? So the tea, my friend, is that I am working on the Grand Arbiter's new West kit for our Secret Tea Society Dark Academia garments. The other tea is like I have done crimes against hat making and I put a hole in my hat, but also see here. It is going to look so absolutely smashing when it's all together. I'm very, very excited for it. So, the other tea, I suppose, for those coming in a little bit later, the chevrons for the front of my skirt are starting to be embroidered. And so you can see some of that. Oh, it's less clear here, but you can really see some of that coming together. I don't know if you can tell, but I actually stitched in the entirety of the stitch lines for these pieces so that the embroidery could be positioned exactly within the stitch lines. So hello. I'm so happy you're here, Alicia. I know you are burning the midnight oil. So thank you for joining us from the East Coast. Scott, I believe you're out east as well. So all of you who are on the East Coast and joining us, thank you so much. I know it's very late. All right. So first things first, I've traced out the new pattern piece. I'm actually going to cut it out so it's a little bit easier to work with. I haven't labeled anything yet. I want to wait until I've started tracing in my style lines. I do hold on to the more sizable pieces of my Swedish tracing paper because they can be used to pattern out things like cuffs, collars, and other wonderful small elements of a garment. It's not exorbitant, but I like to save my resources. So this is me saying I don't hold on to every 2-inch square scrap, but I do hold on to the sizable ones. So normally for the Grand Arbiter, I do a lapped zipper on the front of his waistcoats, so that the zipper is covered. And I found that a little tricky with the chevrons from the dragon, but I think it's still the right way to go. So I'm likely going to do the same here. I'm also going to be adjusting the collar. I don't want this to have this very high neckline. I want it to have more of a lower V neckline. The Grand Arbiter finds it more comfortable, and I really love the way it looks on him. So you can see currently this is a pretty high neckline. That's all right because I'm just tracing in the basic pattern piece before I start making adjustments. When I first was making waistcoats for the Grand Arbiter, they all were double-breasted, based on a sort of Regency-esque pattern, and they had very wide lapels. And then he begged me and begged me to give him these sort of like high-collared, sort of into the 19th century rather than a little bit further into the 19th century rather than Regency styled collars, a little bit more like military-esque, if you will. All right, so on this original one, or rather on the one I did for the dragon, you can see that I have already made a bit of a V here for the dragon based on the original. I did maintain this full length of the pattern so that I would have my work to go back to depending on what I wanted to create in the future. This is my center front line here. And so this is the seam, the bit of fabric I use to create my lapped zipper, if you will. So I'm going to start by tracing in my lapped zipper stitch line, and then we're going to figure out our collar situation. All right. So once you have a pattern and you like it, you can kind of turn it into a bit of a sloper or a master pattern that you can go back to adjust and create new and different looks. And I do that a lot because it is efficient, and also because I cannot fit the Grand Arbiter in person very often. So once I get a good fit for him, it really helps me to keep working with the garments and the patterns that I've previously fit. And as he goes along, he can give me feedback and I can make adjustments and improve the fit. So I'm just going to trace in that seam line for my lap zipper, so I don't lose track of that in my planning. This is my Frixion pen, and which means it's erasable if I don't like something. Although that one I think is running out of ink, alas. Let's try that again. Right. Okay, now at least I can see that line. I think it's slightly visible for you. It's pretty faint, but that's about an inch in from this edge of this pattern, so that when I'm done, I have just like the littlest bit of fabric that covers the zipper in the front of the garment. Right. And then I'm going to want a fairly dramatic collar here, I think, and a pretty good center front opening. I liked the position of the neckline overall in the dragon. So I'm going to mark out where I put that initially. So it finished here. Started there. But I might, I don't know. I'm just going to sketch that in because I might want to go a bit more dramatic. We'll see. So the stripes on the one I did for myself were about 5 inches wide. I know the stripes for the Grand Arbiter are going to be a little bit narrower. This is telling me I have about 12 inches to work with here, but that includes the seam allowance, so it's really more like 11. So I'm going to just move that neckline up a bit. I'm going to erase my previous style line there. That's where the Frixion pens are very, very helpful. So this gives me more like 14 inches here, which I think will be a little bit more functional for what I want. I'm going to also add in my seam allowances. Let's see here. I'm less concerned about that on this center front because I already know that's going to get folded out of the way. But I do need to take into account that whatever is happening here at the bottom, it has like the bottom seam allowance included. I want my stripes to be kind of the same width, if I can all help it. So once I've sort of gone in and measured out my seam allowance, I'm just going to sketch in that seam line. And normally I make a note to myself that that is what's going on so that I don't ask myself, yeah, oh, this tool, oh my gosh, Cheshire, this tool, this is one of the most powerful tools you can have in your sewing work toolbox. It's a seam gauge. And the blue button is actually a slider that can slide up and down. These are approximately 6 inches long, and they're a multi-tool for sewing. So yes, no guesswork in measuring. Very important, but also you can use this to do buttonhole placement. You can draw down this center line for things, which can be very useful. There's a little hole here at the corner, and so you can actually stick a pin in there and then use it as a compass to do circles and arcs and things. So it's actually an incredibly helpful little tool. I love to give them as gifts to people. So I like the ones from Wawak. They don't pay me to say that, but they are the best. And part of it is because it doesn't bend. It's very firm. They are less than $5 a piece. I think they're like $2.50 or $2.99 or something like that. So typically, anytime I get an order from Wawak, I just order another seam gauge because I want to have kind of a million of these. I'm always losing them because either the cats knock them off or I take one to a convention or I hand one to a friend and I'm like, here you go, have a seam gauge. I love to just hand them off to people, but the Wawak ones, they're so sturdy. They have very little bend to them. The more typical ones from like Dritz and oh gosh, the other mainstream Sewing Notions company, they're so flimsy, they just will bend on you. These will eventually lose the interior of the little blue spacer, and then they're not as tight, so they will wear out. But yes, they do make great cat toys. The cats love them and will happily knock them on the floor. So it's very helpful to have a few around. But it's so incredibly helpful for a project like this. I always have one in my sewing kit, and I just consider them quite essential. So, all right, now then, now we are looking at, let's see, now we're looking at about roughly 16 inches there. 13 and a half here. So let's see. Last time I learned that math did not necessarily save me, but I'm going to try. We've got 6 colors. Oh, goodness, come here. I'm working with 6 different colors. This is my ombre. And so these 2 colors they're not leftovers, but I'm not necessarily intending to necessarily have them with embroidery in them because they may be partially covered by other elements. So it's these main 4 colors that are going to have the embroidery. So they are the main ones I need to make certain are visible here, center front of the garment, and that the stripes are most visible for the most impact of the embroidery. So we're going to start. Let's see. If I were to go at a 45-degree angle here, I might actually wish to change the shape of the collar a bit. Let's start up here, right next to where I think that collar is going to notch over. Oh my gosh. Pardon me. I think I have maybe a little bloody nose from the dryness. So excuse me for a moment. Yes. So, that hasn't happened in a while. Normally, I'm so used to living here in the desert, and I'm very hydrated, so it almost never happens. It kind of took me by surprise. All right, let's see here. So if that is stripe there, I could go for 2 inches, but I think I can make it work with 3. So let's see what that looks like. And this is why we do a little bit of mocking up and a little bit of patterning. So this is color number 1, color number 2, color number 3. I really want his stripes to be quite dramatic. So got this is 4. All right. This would be 5. All right. So the challenge here is that my 5th stripe gets a little bit lost down here at the bottom. And so look a bit like that. And I think I want it to come more into the corner rather than having this kind of weird cutoff. So I might need to do a slightly narrower stripe, although this 3-inch situation is very appealing. And then we have this like some sort of collar. And it's coming in like so. Which you can see partially falls over stripe number 2. So stripe 3 and 4 are really going to carry a lot of the weight of the embroidery and the design. I don't know, maybe I'll do 2.5 inches instead of 3. Oh, decisions, everyone. It was a little bit easier to figure it out with the front of the skirt. And yes, Cheshire, you should get like 7 of the seam gauges. They're very inexpensive. Go to Walwack, order some of your notions that you need for sewing, thread, needles, that sort of thing, and absolutely get yourself like 7 of these because you'll only spend like $14 or something like that. They're really good. They're really good. All right, let's see here. I'm going to see how I like it at 2.5 inches versus the 3 inches. So one of the cool things about my clear ruler that you see me working with is it actually has a 45-inch line on here, which is allowing me to line up, make certain my angle is really what I want. Be very accurate in my position of these stripes. So we've got a nice sharp looking chevron happening here. And I think the 2.5 inches is the way to go. Yeah, that's it. All right, so we've still got 2 here, 1 here. Now 3 is here. We've got 4 here, and 5 is moved up here, and then we've got 6 taking up this quadrant. I think this is it. Very exciting. I much prefer the position at the bottom of the garment. So I think I like the way those stripes are falling overall. I'll go back in and make them a little bit darker here momentarily so you can see what I'm talking about. Very exciting. This is the engineering math portion of making a garment. And so I used to be very reticent to talk about how much mathematics is involved in sewing because I don't know. Because of a lot of things that have to do with the way society treats smart women, I suppose. But also because it's much funnier to act like I'm not able to do a lot of arithmetic in my head on the fly. So, but I can because I do so much sewing. Sewing is a fair amount of applied mathematics. I do occasionally really wish I had better calculus skills because that would really help me with hat making. But I don't. That is a bit of math I'm not particularly good at. But geometry, algebra, basic arithmetic, all of that you're going to be using in your sewing. And that's the big secret. Sewists are actually very, very effective mathematicians. All right. So now you can see a little bit better how these stripes are going to line up, what they're going to look like. This portion, the neck piece, is actually very fussy. When I was doing the dragon waistcoat, this was the part that was the trickiest to join into the garment for finishing purposes. Also, hello, Bill. How are you doing, my friend? So good to see you. And for my own ease, I'm just going to go back in. And now I'm just going to trace over my seam lines. So now you can really see here we are. This is what the front of that dragon is going to look like. And when the zipper is in place, it'll meet up. Hopefully everything will line up. Very sharp, very nice. We'll have this beautiful chevron down the front. And the grand arbiter is going to look so very sharp. I'm very excited. Now I have the dubious pleasure of patterning out each of these individual pieces and then keeping those labeled so I don't lose track of them whilst I'm putting together this garment. So it's really like we just did all of that. Now I get to pattern it again, but in individual chunks, which I have to make certain I am orienting how things go together, top and bottom. So that's where things like notches come into play to help me keep things lined up. So I'll be putting in my own notches, amongst other things. And Cheshire, I'm not calling you out to make you feel uncomfortable or weird or anything, but just because I know that sometimes I say these things very offhand, and you are my resident beginning sewist. So notches are these little diamond marks you see on your seams. And there are all sorts of reasons that you have notches, but the main reason is they tell you how to align pattern pieces together. So they tell you this seam and this seam, they go together because they have matching notches. So you can always add in your own little notches. And they look like little diamonds or triangles on your paper patterns. They can also be used as ways of aligning other things. So sometimes you'll have a notch that tells you this is where you align your pocket, for instance, or this is the point where you need to start easing in your sleeve cap. There are all sorts of markings that can get added to a pattern, and they usually have a very utilitarian meaning. And so if you have a different way of indicating those things for yourself, you don't have to use what the pattern uses, but it's very helpful to know what they're indicating. Oh, yes, Shasha says, I have seen those in bot paper patterns. How do you mark them on cloth? This is a great question. So there are lots of ways to indicate your notches on your fabric. And one of those is simply to draw them in like a Frixion pen or a number 2 pencil. The way most of us learn to do it. Okay, I'm going to make a quick, here's a notch. This is how you mark it. So let's say this is a piece of fabric. And the pattern calls for 2 notches. I can let me do another bit for that, make it a bit more clear. Most modern patterns call for a 5/8 seam allowance. A lot of historical patterns call for 1/2 inch seam allowance. I almost entirely work with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If I'm patterning something or taking something like this West kit and taking it apart and recreating it and turning it into my own patterns, then I always use a 1/2 inch seam allowance because the math is very fast in my head. But most modern patterns have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And within that seam allowance, look, there are my little notches. As long as I don't go past the seam allowance, I can just cut them in to the seam allowance like so, as 2 little triangles like this. I don't want to go past my seam allowance because that will impact the integrity of where I'm stitching. I just want to notch a little way into the fabric. The other thing you can do is just snip, snip, and create just 2 little snips like so. That's a very quick way of notching. So it just creates like a little flap there rather than 4 little triangles. I don't have any straight pins up here. The other thing I do is sometimes I'll just put 2 straight pins in where my notch marks are. If it's not very complicated and I'm going to be attaching the fabric pieces shortly. I'll just put straight pins in as a little. There are my notches. I just need to line them up. Pretty often, if it's a simple pattern piece, I don't notch it anymore if I'm very familiar with the pattern because I know how it's lined up. But if it's something new and I haven't put it together again, or it's something like this West kit where there are lots of weird little pattern pieces that I have to keep track of what the top and the bottom edge of that pattern piece is, I am very assiduous with my notching. But yeah, you can always just draw it in with your Choco, with your Frixion pen. Oh, yeah. Yes. So I'm so happy that this is making more sense to you, Cheshire. The goal is with these things to always kind of make them efficient and fast because they're not supposed to be tedious. They are tools to help you line things up. So whatever you do should feel comfortable for you, be fairly quick, and be something where you will be able to recognize it when you come to that marking and it's time to sew your pieces of fabric together, whatever that looks like. And I use all of these techniques depending on the garment in question. So for these pieces, for my skirt, what I did actually, in particular, to help my friend who's doing all the machine embroidery for us, I actually think this is a really good example. So I actually went in and I wrote into the seam allowance with arrows to let her know this is up, this is towards the waist, this is the center seam, and this is the hem side with arrows pointing towards the hem so that it would help her line things up. And then, because I don't really want to cut into this fabric more than I have to, I actually just drew in my notches as a reminder to myself when it is time to sew everything together. So you can see my notches are just traced in. This is probably the fussiest possible setup I could do. You can see that I've got my long stitches here along all of my stitch lines in a contrast color. They're very contrasting thread color, so they're bright orange compared to the green. So when they're not on the screen, I'm just looking at them here under normal light, they're very visible, which I wanted them to be supremely easy to distinguish, so that it was going to be very easy to line up our embroidery. And I wanted it to be easy because I'm passing this off to my dear friend who's doing all of this like fussy embroidery work for me. And so I needed it to be as clear as possible so she would have the most ease in lining up all of the embroidery. And I especially like the cat. It's so good. Oh my gosh. Hello, it's live with Fifi and Freddie, our favorite Wednesday night podcast and live stream. Hello, my darlings. I'm just faffing about, talking about sewing. You can also see what it looks like on the back with the embroidery. So there's this like tearaway stabilizer that helps the embroidery look really sharp. And it looks really cool from behind. So the whole thing actually is quite fussy to do the setup for this. But I'm really happy with how it's looking. And I'm so excited to pull this whole thing together. So should be beautiful. I like that it kind of disappears in different light. So it's going to be kind of just a bit mysterious. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, Cheshire. I'm so happy to like make notches a little bit less arcane because they're very helpful. And when I was starting out with stitching my own garments. No one explained to me what notches were for or how to mark them. And so I had some real misadventures with notches. But now I can tell you they're very helpful. And so for something like this, I make certain that I'm going to be putting in my notches. And they're like different, let's say, conventions with your notches. So I've got 3 notches here. I could go up to 4 notches, but once you get past 4, you usually start putting them together in different like orientations, if you will, so that they're a little bit more distinguishable. And even at 4, it can be hard to distinguish. So instead, you'll see something like this, where you get 2 and 1 with a space in between, instead of like trying to keep up with, just going extremely long. By the time you're at 5, visually, it's not as distinctive as like between 3 and 5. It's just a big block of notches. So between 2 and 3, it's still like kind of distinctive. Then you do something like this, where you've got the 2 space 1, very helpful. You can do this, where you've got 3 space 1. So these are some things I do for myself to help keep up with how I'm going to align all of these pieces. And now that I've got it sort of notched and everything like that, I will go in and I'll actually trace out every single piece and add seam allowance. So because I'm piecing these stripes together to create the overall garment, it's very important that I recall the seam allowance, or the garment will shrink in length and I will be very sad, because for each of these stripes, each side needs seam allowance. And if I forgot my seam allowance, I'd lose an inch between each stripe. That would really shrink this garment extremely. So that'd be like shrinking it 6 or 8 inches or something like that. Madness. So it's very important to remember those seam allowances. The other fun part of this, though, is that now that I've got my stripes on my garment, I get to start playing around with the embroidery and where I want my embroidered pieces to be. And I've got all of these really cool samples to work with. And I'll get to find out whether or not these are things that Sarah, my friend who's doing the heavy lifting of the machine embroidery, feels she can resize them, or I need to pay to have them resized. So I've got a sigil, which I'm very in love with. We've got our special teacup. I'm also quite smitten with the teacup. I don't have an example of the unicorn and the peryton, but we have those as well. I'm also been toying around with a death's head moth. We've got this 7-pointed star, which I think is really beautiful. And we also have this wonderful star that has like a special name that just went out of my head. Oh my gosh, a crop top and a cape is a bold look, but maybe not with this outfit. Yes, it's true. If I forgot to include the seam allowances on this West kit, by the time I was done with it, it would turn into a crop top. It's true. It's perfect. I also have this, which also has a special name, but I think it's very evocative of of something, and I'm curious to see if anyone else is picking up what I'm putting down or at least holding in my hands. So these are some of the elements that we are toying with. We also have some like really beautiful like flourishy stuff. So the Grand Arbiter might get some fun, interesting pieces here. Right. Sarah was very kind and stitched these out in a lot of different sizes. Um, so, yes, Martha, I think, is picking up what I'm putting down. As it were. A stick shift. Yes, that is definitely what it evokes, at least in part. Right. Come here. Oh, so many samples. I'm very grateful for all the samples. They're very helpful. Okay. So some of them already came, we purchased them from Etsy or Urban Threads. Urban Threads is such a wonderful resource for your machine embroidery. Oh, I love this. A lesbian stick shift, perhaps. Yes. That's great. I love it. So good. So some of these came in a multiplicity of sizes, very helpful. Some of them only came in a couple of sizes. If you're on Patreon, you already know that we have made these embroidery designs available. The ones that we had custom created are available to our Patreon subscribers. And so excited to share all of those with you and to see what you do with them, because I think they're going to be really beautiful designs. Oh my goodness. Yes. We kind of want to look like tea wizards, I suppose. That's what we're going for. I was hoping to find some sort of like alchemical symbols that we're going to read really beautifully, but didn't have very good luck with that. So I went with sort of woo-woo magic-y looking things. That's a technical term. Without being too didn't want to be disrespectful to anyone's sort of pagan or Wiccan religious beliefs. So I was very careful overall with what we chose. It's possible that I made some errors. If I did, those are all on me. That was a Leviathan cross. Thank you, Martha. Thank you. Oh, Alicia says they are super fun. I wish I had the time to embroider them by hand, but I suspect I'll be hand sewing the crepe for a tea gown. You probably will be hand sewing the crepe for a tea gown. That's very exciting. The embroidery will be there when you have time. I couldn't do all of this by hand, and so the only reason it's feasible is that we're using machine embroidery, frankly. So I'm cutting out some samples in sizes I think will work. It's very helpful for me to be able to visualize what I want to wear. We did find some alchemical symbols. I will show you. They are supremely small, and that's too small. I don't think it will read very well, and I want this to like have some visual impact. Oh, Martha says the asymmetrical star is a unicursal hexagram. Thank you, Martha. Thank you. Look, have a librarian. Librarians know what they're doing and they will find the information. Martha is magnificent. Thank you, Martha. All right. So you go over there. Now, I wonder, let's see. Okay. All right. I think I've got enough to be going on with, as they say. So we did also acquire these really beautiful flourishes, which I was hoping I could find a good place for them on the project, but I have yet to find a place where I can put them that they line up properly. But now I'm a bit obsessed with them, and so I keep looking. But you can see like this little sort of bat or dragon flourish, very fun. Oh, hello, Phyllis. I'm so happy to see you. I hope that you are recovering from your ordeal with the plumbing. That's so terrible. That sort of thing is just deeply distressing. Alicia, sleep well, my friend. I'm so happy you could be here for a bit. It was wonderful to catch up and to gossip about things. So thank you for stopping in. So this is one of the other flourishes that I don't think I'm going to be able to use, but I'm really obsessed with these flourishes. They're beautiful. And I think that they really suit the dark academia vibe, even if I didn't find a place for them to be worked into our costumes. So, yes, oh my gosh. Phyllis says, the insurance adjuster is coming tomorrow. It is a process when you have this kind of like really dreadful flooding. That's terrible, Martha. Good luck. My fingers are crossed, and I am thinking of you. So it's cold where you are too. This is no good at all. Terrible time to have any sort of plumbing disaster. Mm. All right. So let me show you. Pardon me. At least the nosebleed happened off camera. I'm so grateful for that. It was very like, oh no, what's happening? It is a sign that I need to be drinking more tea, though, because normally that is a I am dehydrated situation here in the desert. So let me show you some of the things I'm thinking about, how I'm pondering potentially laying things out for the Grand Arbiter's stripes. I'll also be like giving him an opportunity to give me his own feedback on what he'd like, and how much of it he would like to have visible. So we'll play around there. All right, so we've got our universal hexagram are Leviathan cross, and I think this is a fairy star. And so they're very like, they look really arcane, without necessarily being any specific thing. I also don't want to be secretly like having curses embroidered onto our garments. So that's part of it. So my other elements that I'm using, these currently I don't have them in smaller sizes, so I have to see if I need to get them in smaller sizes, because these are 3.5 inches tall, and what I want is something more like 2 inches tall, so about 1.5 inches less tall. The stripes are 2.5 inches wide approximately. So 2 inches tall gives a little bit of room around the edge of the design, so that it has space to breathe. And then, we go in and we can rearrange them, do all sorts of fun things so they can be in different orientations. What I did for mine is the teacup and the sigil were going to be going down the center front of mine, but the grand arbiters is not set up the same. So if I were to do the teacup, it would be in the stripe, the sigil would be in the stripe, and then there'd be some like magical elements around them. But imagine these at like, shrunk down so they fit into the space available, rather than at this 3.5 inch dimension. So I might include these in the grand arbiters. We also have a unicorn, a periton, and a cat figure that we can work in to the design. So we're going to see, but I'm very excited to be at this point where I can start making decisions about the layout of his embroidery elements. This portion will not get embroidery. It's going to be almost entirely covered up by a collar element coming here. So I don't want to do embroidery that's going to be totally covered. I'll still put some embroidery here because some of it will be visible. We'll have embroidery in this stripe, and this stripe. Then we have this very big triangular piece here at the bottom, which will probably remain naked, or I'll finally have my place to put in a flourish. It'll get a bit of a flourish, although it's more likely to get this reversed like that, or to have one of these worked in or something like that. So I've got some decisions to be made. I'm very, very keen. I think it's going to be really beautiful when we get done with it. So we'll see what all... oh, Phyllis likes the one with the hidden dragon. Right, isn't this so... Look, I'm obsessed with this one. I just kind of want to find a way to work it in somewhere in the garment, and I haven't quite found it yet. But I keep sort of toying with, well, can I put it here? Could we have a dragon, sort of an homage to how we're both dragons? Will it look too weird at this angle? So yes, I do love the hidden dragon so much. So thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, I do. I think that there's enough space here that we could put a little something in that space potentially. So I'll see if the Grand Arbiter agrees with us. because I am sort of obsessed with this. This one I think I like it more, even though this one maybe fits better at the angle. I'm not certain. So, or enlarge this one, says Phyllis, so it takes up more of the space. It's kind of at an angle where I know this is like, I sort of wish the dragon sat a bit more like this in relation to the garment, but because of how I'm patterning it, he's going to be at an angle. If he were enlarged and filled more of the space, that might be really nice. The other option is to do something like put the sigil over here and then have the dragon pointed at the sigil, like so. Not really worried about being too busy necessarily. It is honestly quite helpful to lay things out and look at them on the screen and see how they read. I think I like the sigil more than the teacup there. I'm going to do one. Yeah, some fun to be had. So now you've seen where we're going with the project. Ooh, Bess says you could put it on the lapel collar where it turns back from the center front. That's a great idea. I really I haven't patterned out the lapel yet, so I need to do that portion. I can change the angle of the collar to match the embroidery. Yeah, especially as I haven't designed it yet. All I've done is commit to where the lapel collar situation is going to go into the garment. So absolutely. The teacup plus sigil equals tea time. Yes, Martha, that is exactly right. Thank you for picking it up when we were putting down. I really appreciate you so much. That's exactly it. We wanted to make a sort of arcane tea time kind of thing. So very shortly this week, I will be releasing the final big piece of embroidery that we're putting on our garment. This is the full crest. It's going to be stitched onto the back of my bodice. And so I'm very excited for it because it's really stunning piece of art and it was a wonderful collaboration. So that's going to be coming out. I just have to like write up the post and upload all of the files. It will be in the same formats as what we did for the other piece of embroidery. And maybe I will also go ahead and link to some of these optional flourishes. We'll call them optional flourishes that we may or may not use, but you may be falling in love with the dragon right now, for instance. And so I want you to have access to those because you can buy them and download them from the same sources that we got them from. So, but this has been lovely tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for an absolutely delightful chit chat about the ongoing project here and for a little bit of a look at how I start adjusting style lines to create a new look for the Grand Arbiter and I, and the ways in which I'm perfectly happy to abuse a pattern and make it my butler. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. I will be with all of you on Friday night for Friday tea, and we are having Crafternoon on Saturday. But most importantly, we have our first book club book chat on Sunday, our first one of 2026. E.F. Deal is our special guest, and we're reading Esprit de Corps, which I'm very excited to discuss with all of you. So I will see you at one of these times through the week. It's wonderful to be back on our schedule. For those of you who are in the southeast or like to travel, we're going to be at Con Possible in Atlanta in early February. Tickets are still available. The room block closes on January 15th, so be certain to get your room. If you haven't, pick up your tickets, come join us. It's a lovely convention. We adore it, and we're so happy to be back. We also have our links available for the Tippy Golden Teacup Awards. Those went out in the newsletter, the first newsletter of 2026 after a very lengthy hiatus. Oh, Phyllis says, I really liked the book. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to hear that, Phyllis. I think it's a wonderful steampunk romp. Which a great way to start the year, and you know, it's very steampunk. So we're going to have a great time talking about it, and EF Deal is a delight. So I know we're going to have a lovely conversation. So you can find all of these details on our calendar, which is posted to my website and also to the Patreon. That also went out in our newsletter. If you would like to subscribe to the newsletter and you don't already, please message me privately and I'll add you. I don't currently have a way to do mass additions to the new newsletter, and I am salty about it, but we'll figure that out as time passes. For now, I'm happy to individually add people to the subscriber list with my gratitude for you joining, because the newsletter is the best way to keep up with what we have coming up outside of Patreon. So thank you everyone for your support, your wonderful company, and honestly, just for the wonderful creative energy we shared tonight. It's been really delightful way to start the year. And I'm just so happy to be back. So, all right, everyone, please remember to treasure yourselves as I treasure you as you go out tonight. Wash your hands. Drink the good tea. Put on your favorite earrings to go shopping. Put on a tiara. It's always tiara time. Make a caftan for yourself. Do something lovely. The world is hard. Things are happening that are really difficult to navigate. And we don't have control over those. So seize your joy. Treasure yourself. Take very good care, because you are irreplaceable. And I adore you. Good night, everyone. Cheers.